Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank you again for saving the best for last. Mr. Speaker, earlier in this sitting, I had posed questions to the Minister of Economic and Development and Transportation regarding the enforcement of the Traffic Safety Act. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask questions to the Minister of Justice on the same topic. Mr. Speaker, in the previous Assembly, we had passed Nunavut's Traffic Safety Act, which included some significant amendments, one of which important provision is in the legislation was regarding distracted driving. Mr. Speaker, the City of Iqaluit issued a public service announcement earlier last month, concerning what it describes as frequent contraventions of the rules of the road, including the issue of distracted driving. I'd like to ask if the Minister can describe how his department works with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and municipal bylaw officials to enforce this provision of the Traffic Safety Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Justice, Mr. Samaila.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The department has minimal contact with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. As he had mentioned, it falls under the Economic Development and Transportation Act, Safety Act, but wherever we can, we try to work with each other to see where improvements can be made and try to protect our people from distracted drivers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
First supplementary, Mr. Lightstone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very confident that the Minister will agree when I say that impaired driving is completely unacceptable under any circumstances. Impaired driving also includes driving while under the influence of cannabis, other drugs, or alcohol. As the Minister will recall, the Government of Canada announced $968,000 in support to the Government of Nunavut to support law enforcement by training and equipping them with standardized field sobriety testing and drug recognition expert evaluation to detect and deter drug-impaired drivers, as well as enforcing new driving offenses. Mr. Speaker, this funding is also intended to be used to develop standardized data collection and reporting practices that will be used to analyze trends, identify gaps, and provide an accurate picture of drug-impaired driving in Nunavut. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask if the Minister can describe how his department has been involved in this initiative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Justice, Mr. Samaila.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question, and I agree. Any type of impaired driving, I'm totally against it. We all have children out there that are playing out in the streets, and they should be able to play out there safely. The funding, when the member is referring to, was announced in 2019, and it was towards drug-impaired driving. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police was tasked to take the training on training the officers on how to use the equipment. Unfortunately, due to COVID, none of the members were able to go south for the training. But moving forward, the department, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, is in discussions with the federal government on how we can use these funds to better support the members and deter drug-impaired driving within the territory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Second and final supplementary, Mr. Lightstone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for that response. I look forward to the Minister providing an update on the House at a later date as to when that training is provided to our local RCMP officers. Mr. Speaker, I share a concern with the City of Iqaluit on the risks associated with frequent contraventions of the rule of the road and the Traffic Safety Act. Mr. Speaker, I've heard many complaints of unsafe driving. Issues such as smell of cannabis from vehicles on the road, to empty bottles, alcohol containers being tossed out of moving vehicles onto the side of the road in such beautiful places as Upper Base, Road to Nowhere, and Sylvia Grinnell. Mr. Speaker, as the training with standardized field sobriety testing has yet to be provided to our RCMP and municipal bylaw officers, I'd like to ask if the drug recognition expert evaluation detection has been provided to deter impaired drug drivers, as well as if the RCMP and the Department of Justice have been able to develop standardized data collection and reporting practices to enable them to analyze trends with regard to drug-impaired driving in Nunavut. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Justice, Mr. Simailak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. With regard to the equipment, I personally don't know if we have that on hand now, but any training and whatnot, it will be coming and hopefully used properly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker.
All questions